So I'm trying to put myself in between you guys.
No, I'll type my desk. I don't know why I started the meeting from this computer, so I have to live stream through this computer.
Oh,
We're live streaming right now, so everybody knows.
are you saying Bella? So I'm trying to put myself in between you guys.
No, I'll type my desk. Okay, so that started. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this to you. You're gonna have to admit people when they come up here. Just hit admit when you join. Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks.
Aren't we looking good today?
Hi, Bill.
Hey, everybody. Sam, seems like I see you on these meetings just about every day.
Yes, you do. Unfortunately,
Yeah, I'd rather meet in person. I miss all of you guys.
Well, give the armadillo a hug.
Hello, Reggie.
What's the armadillo?
You actually want to see the armadillo?
I feel like that there's a story behind that.
There's Reggie.
Oh, he's handsome.
He's handsome.
Bargain piece out there.
that roadkill, Bill.
No, it's not roadkill, Sam. There is a very famous band called the Grateful Dead, and Bobby Weir is their principal guitarist. And I knew Bob's sister, and one day we were at a meeting together, and I said something about missing the Southwest, and believe it or not, she and Bobby went out and shot that armadillo, had it taxidermed, and sent to me. Dr. Scissors,
Yes, sir. Mr. Wade.
nice letter in the Sentinel, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.
Hi, Doc.
Hey, George. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing my job here, doing my duty, staying inside until Sunday.
And then what are you going to do? Run around the neighborhood?
No, I'm not gonna. I gotta be careful. If I was younger,
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been staying home, but when I go out, I'm going out into the wilderness where it's just me, my dogs, and the critters out there. So
I hear it's crowded though.
not if you know where to go.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm
I had
still
a
walking
friend-
every day. I haven't walked yet today, but I did 7.5 miles yesterday.
Oh, jeez. That's great.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Well, the loop
I walked
around
around I walked around my bedroom.
Did you? The loop around Redlands Mesa is roughly 3 miles, and I've now taken to walking from the house up over the hill down to the lunch loop, all the way down to Broadway on the trail, back up, and then all the way around Redlands Mesa. That's 7.2 miles.
Well done.
Nice.
I got my treadmill working in the garage.
There you go.
I can't go to the gym.
Good stuff. Chairman Reese, I'll leave it to you on when we get started. I have not heard that other folks such as Keith or Andrew, whether they're going to be joining us today or not, but look to you on how much time you want to give them to join in.
Yeah, I haven't heard from them either. I will let you all know that I have emailed Steve twice now, and he has not responded. So I don't anticipate that he'll be joining us either. So,
Hi, Kristen.
hi, George.
Oh, Christian, if I may, to that end, I did receive, and I think, Bill, you and Christian were copied on it as well. It may have been in your city email account. It does sound like Steve will be tendering his resignation as part of the planning commission, largely due to his ongoing health challenges and issues. So just a FYI, both him and Kathy will have regular seats on the planning commission. And so that means Sam and Ken, you will be taking over regular seat positions until the city council has an opportunity to reconsider other applicants and then assign seats accordingly.
They'll move up regardless as the alternates. They'll become the new planning commissioners. The new ones that they'll consider will be for them the alternates. Did we change our code?
We don't need to switch through that in a second.
Okay, so I think knowing that, Sam and Ken, we're gonna need you at all public hearings. So you're officially on the roster, and I think we can go ahead and get started.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. We've got a couple items for you today. So the general schedule is to do an update to you on the comprehensive plan, to talk briefly about neighborhood meetings, which I previewed again previous workshop, and then walk you through some draft performance standards for mini storage or mini warehouse units here in the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Thornton here, who will give you the update on the comprehensive plan status.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'll try not to sound too muffled. So are you seeing my screen with the PowerPoint?
No,
No.
Your screen.
Okay.
Go to Zoom. Go back to
An
Zoom.
icon.
Go where?
Go to the Zoom icon at the bottom. Go back to the Zoom program.
Which is,
The camera. Yeah, click
Okay.
on that and then click on the green share screen.
here we go. Are you here?
I want to go on the-
Oh, here we go.
Just click on that.
How about now?
Now we
Yep.
got it.
Okay, great.
They're seeing all the subtext too, just as a heads up thing.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to run through a few slides. Stop me if you have a question. This is obviously informal, and so just wanted to bring you up to date as to kind of where we're at. You know, we're well into our 18-month process, and when you look at the last 6 months, kind of looking in October, as you recall, we had the public workshop where we discussed the two sub areas, 24 Road and the lower downtown area. And then in November, we had our last visioning workshop with the public, where we had a really nice gathering at Two Rivers, or Grand Junction Convention Center, we call it now. And we had a lot of input on the vision and values of the community, which informs the goals and objectives of the plan. Since then, CPAC has met, our advisory committees, they've weighed in on both the sub areas and the draft vision goals and objectives. They did that earlier this year. So basically, HLA, Housel Levine, has kind of retreated and on drafting the vision goals, objectives, and sub area drafting, as well as now putting together the draft master plan itself that will be, we are told we'll receive it on the 30th of April. So we don't have that in hand yet, but it's coming soon. So that's kind of where we're at there. Wanted to share some things about the vision and goals of the plan. Really, there's kind of 11, what you might call them topic areas, and with goals for each of those. And looking at these 11 areas, one, we're really wanting to limit leapfrog development and encourage infill and redevelopment. The second one, supporting and helping to expand downtown to the riverfront and expand areas around CMU, provide access to and connection between these districts. On strong neighborhoods, achieving livability and affordability. access and connections between neighborhoods and commercial areas, open spaces. On the fourth, we're looking at a resilient and diverse economy, maintaining our strong regional employment presence and provider of goods and services. Under collective identity, creating a sense of pride, small town business-friendly reputation, and high quality of life. Efficient and connected transportation system, access and mobility, and accessibility to neighborhoods, commercial areas, making sure that we're looking at complete streets along with active transportation corridors, providing access and mobility. Great places and recreation opportunities, ensuring the community has access to parks and open spaces. The riverfront is a linear park system and waterfront. Resources stewardship, the community is responsible for natural resources, recognizing it is an opportunity and responsibility. Industry continues to flourish and acts responsibly with environmental stewardship and impacts, preserving limited resources and preserving natural assets. Under the ninth one there, effective and transparent government, excellent core service to all residents with open communication and a responsive approach to all, and really hope that would be residents are engaged in the civic process. Education, really that city and community support for local education from D51 to CMU. And then the last one, safe and healthy community, city and community proactively and successfully responds to public safety and community healthcare needs that support all residents. So that's a real kind of Reader's Digest version of the vision that comes out of those 11 topic areas. So, looking at that first one, kind of looking at the goals and objectives for that one, the goal. So basically each topic, each of those 11 topic areas establishes the vision for the city and it has a goal. The goal was conceived from what we heard through visioning workshops and other public outreach, including surveys and comments received on the comprehensive plan website. The responsible and managed growth, here's what we heard. Well, the goal being managed growth in a fiscally responsible manner, encouraging infill redevelopment and developing consistent regulations to implement the comprehensive plan. And you can see the 6 objectives there on your screen, really encouraging that infill redevelopment, supporting neighborhood commercial and mixed use, maintaining our community separators between Fruita and Grand Junction and Palisade, preserving the rural areas and natural environment where appropriate, maintaining and building that infrastructure that supports urban development, and encouraging development, redevelopment along prominent corridors that really fell out of through all the public input that we received. And looking more at responsible and managed growth, there were some kind of big picture, and I know we talked a little bit about this at the Planning Commission a couple of months ago, but I kind of threw it into this slideshow here today to kind of remind us of what those are. And I'm going to talk about each of those. I won't read them off this slide here, but kind of going on to the next slide. The first one really is kind of a big picture on managing responsible and managed growth is we're not proposing any change to the urban development boundary. So you can see from this graphic here that the area of Clifton is outside our planning area this time. In 2010, it was part of it, but that was part of our joint planning effort with Mesa County, where we looked at Clifton as well as Whitewater. So those areas remain outside our UDP, or the area that we would, under the Persigo agreement, expect to annex over the coming years. And so whatever planning effort in 2010 would not change with this plan, and it would be something that Mesa County would do in the future if they thought that those areas needed to be relooked at or changed. So everything that's got a color on the map is the area under the 2020 comp plan boundary. In looking at land use designations, as you all know, we have a blended map. And we have a future land use designations that include quite a few, the 22 plan, there's quite a few categories or designations from rural down to urban residential mixed use, which is our really higher density districts. The recommendation with the 2020 plan is to really reduce 6 land use designations to 3. So basically eliminating the state, keeping the rural, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But eliminating the estate, which are the larger 1 to 3 acre lots. And that doesn't mean you couldn't have a 1 acre lot, but it would be under a more urban district, and really trying to remove ourselves from the rural business, because we're more urban than we are rural. And so, well, we now have residential low, medium, high, and then urban. We would classify those 6 areas into 3, residential low, medium, and residential high. And looking at the density ranges of these 3, residential low would be 1 acre to 5.5, so R1 to R5 basically. The medium would be 5.5 to 12, which would be under our current zoning would be R8 and R12. And then residential high would be 12 plus, and that would be under our current code would be R16 and R24. The rural residential would be similar to what we have now, which are 5 acre minimum lot sizes. And so those are really the categories that we're proposing under the current proposal. All right, moving along here. In looking at these rural areas, so you noticed on the previous slide, we're recommending keeping the rural designation. We see a benefit to that in the sense that in looking at our plan area, our UDB, there's a couple of areas that we think can be designated rural for the next 20 years, perhaps, based on our projections for growth. So we worked with the state demographer and looking at the projections for growth over the next 20 years. On the right side of this slide, you'll see a chart and the population estimates. And based on what we have determined with the state demographers, in the UDB right now, we have just under 100,000 people. But 99,819 is the state demographer's estimate. And in 2020, that's 2020, in 2030, with a 1.1% growth rate, we're projecting that we'll have 110,000 and in 2040, 124,000 plus people within our UDB. That doesn't mean they'll all be within the city limits, because it doesn't just include city limits, it includes everything in the UDB. And as you know, we have checkerboard annexation patterns at this point. Unless we can get rid of all the checkerboard look, there would still be areas in that urban area that would not be under the city's city limits. And looking at the needs then, based on that 1.1% growth, there's an annual need of 557 new dwelling units per year. And then looking at analysis of our vacant land that's available for development, redevelopment in our community, we've determined there's about 11,000 acres total in our UDB, and which is more than what we need in order to accommodate, at least for the next 20 years, the 557 average per dwelling unit per year. And so we've identified some areas up in the north, Appleton, as well as Central Orchard Mesa here, east of 31 Road, and so kind of north of H1/4, although it goes up to I Road over here closer to 22. That these areas of rural could remain rural in support of not leapfrogging out sooner than we need to, and that we can try to help concentrate our growth more inward and not so much outward. And so remember, you recall a previous slide talked about not moving the UDB boundary, keeping it where it is. Well, those areas of rural would still be within our UDB, our urban development boundary, but wouldn't be looked at as an area that we would want to develop into over the next 20 years at least, and maybe longer, depending on how growth occurs. Now, if growth all of a sudden speeds up and say goes twice as fast, in our 5-year comp plan updates, we want to take a look at that, and we may need to expand more urban densities further north in the case of Appleton and further east in the case of Orchard Mesa. But based on the 1.1% growth, we believe we can handle the growth inside the areas that we're identifying as more urban over the 20-year planning horizon. Let's see, I think that was pretty much what I wanted to say there. I might add that I've actually met with Mesa County Planning Commission in a workshop back in February and presented this whole thing to them. And this concept of the rural areas, and they were pretty much in agreement, and were up to the idea of needing to make sure that whatever the city adopts for our UDB, that they need to adopt it as well and honor that. So I was pleased to hear that. Here's some protection of existing residential, kind of some of those big picture items of managed growth, is making sure that we do protect our existing residential areas. And these are just some examples. This isn't all the residential areas of our community, obviously, but clearly there's large areas of the Redlands that are really single family, lower density, kind of that residential low, and making sure that we preserve that, not try to influence that in a negative way, as well as Fruitvale and the regional Grand Junction, of course, and also out in Orchard Mesa. Again, just some examples. Also, the goal of trying to maintain and expand neighborhood commercial. Here's some examples where that might happen. When you look at the Redlands area, right now we have the Monument Village and Meadowlark Monument Village and Meadowlark Gardens area, and so really looking at the ability to try to expand maybe some opportunity there as kind of centers of mixed use and neighborhood commercial. In the case of at the Safeway at 29 Road and Patterson Road, that's an existing, it's pretty tight here. It's probably not going to expand, but clearly the plan recognizes that as being a benefit to our community and maintaining that. And then on Orchard Mesa, on this example, you can see where there's the area out here on the highway at 29 Road, perhaps maybe expanding that a little bit, and then also expanding by Okagawa Farms here, where Unwheat comes into 29, and also at 29 and B.5 Road, where that opportunity for some future commercial. One of the things I heard from various residents on Orchard Mesa was the need to just have more shopping opportunities out there, and that seemed to be a good place to put it. And it corresponds with, especially right here, it's a 29 and B.5 is already something that we have on our current future land use map. And then, as well as expanding some mixed use areas. And so in the 24 Road area, as you all know, there's the community that Planning Commission approved a few months back, the 5 pods there around community hospital. That's already kind of heading that direction. And so this plan would recognize that, or would. Also some city-owned properties where we've got the mixed use on the Berkey Park property, most recently done, and also kind of looking in the future at a Matchett area that there might be some things that could come out of having a mixed use opportunity on the south end of that property. And then of course, lots of things are happening in the South Downtown Las Colonias area, and mixed use is definitely part of that bigger picture. And then CMU, there's a plan development out here on the 150 acres that has a mixed use zoning in a plan development context now. And so this plan would further support that continuing down the road to have that happen. All right. So that was all. Those previous slides were all kind of talking about managing growth on that first one of the 11. Now we're going to kind of just quickly go through the other 10. So number 2 on that list was downtown and university districts. Sure. Do you have any questions so far? Anybody?
Dave,
Yeah.
designating those areas of Orchard Mesa in the north as rural, I think is a great idea. Is that going to help us with the conflict, the inherent conflict we have with the county when somebody comes in and says they want a zone? We're not going to, since we're designating those rural, we're not going to entertain a project out there that's at greater density than rural. Am I correct in that, or are we always going to be entertaining projects?
Well, I think that's where it's really important that we get Mesa County Planning Commission on board and that they adopt our plan, especially for those areas that they're going to have more of the pressure from the landowner to say, you know, I don't want to wait 20 years. I don't want to sell it for 4 units per acre out here. So by designating it rural, basically it falls in line with the current zoning for most properties out there right today in Mesa County. The county's already zoned those areas RSFR in the county, which is 5 acre minimum lot sizes. So what we're suggesting to the county is don't change it. Your current zoning is matching what our plan is showing. And that the only need to change would occur in the future when it's determined that the city needs to grow more north than what we're showing on this proposed comprehensive plan, which right now is about 8.25 road. So anything between 8.25 and say I.25, which is all within the UDB, that 1 mile stretch, would need to kind of wait until the demand is there. And we think it's not going to be in demand until about 2040 or later.
Yeah, that's what we think, but you know, and that was a very diplomatic answer, but you know, I'm a developer and I come in and I want to put 800 units or 400 units out there and I find some rural landowner that suddenly is in his 80s and wants to sell. Are we going to tell them, no, you can't do that because it's designated rural, or are we going to end up in a fight over that?
Well, I mean, the first step would be they would need to come to us and say, we think the time is sooner rather than the 20 years that this particular property we're looking at needs to have 800 units on it, or whatever that proposal might be. And they're going to need to do all the studies and basically show us why it's needed and how it's going to be paid for. We're trying to, you know, minimize our leapfrogging and the cost of services and just the sprawl that has continued over the years as in a patchwork fashion. So we're really trying to minimize that, and they need to be able to show us that the time is sooner rather than later for that expansion.
And I actually think that's great.
Yeah, Commissioner Wade, if I may add to that a little bit too, is that certainly the process would be akin to what it is today, is that should something that we don't expect come along and we think that it's supportable, or the applicant or project proponent does, they could certainly request a comprehensive plan amendment for those changes. And then it's really left to you and the city council to determine whether the plan change is warranted, and that would set the stage then for looking at expansion to, or a change even to some other designation that we are showing on the plan.
Kind of a question that reflects on our discussion here, is it seems like it would decrease the use of flagpole annexations.
It would definitely decrease it for sure. Can't guarantee we won't still have a couple, but yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear on that, in those areas that are specifically shown as rural, that likely would be the case. You know, we wouldn't see any far-reaching annexations, but do recall that even kind of internal to our traditional urban development boundary, we have a number of annexations that will continue to likely have some flagpole component to them based on the Persego agreements direction and a longstanding agreement to take in those properties when they are developed. So I don't think they go away. Our hope is that this plan, especially the land use component of it, just creates a predictable environment for existing landowners and potential developers about where kind of that boundary is between urban and rural, at least for the foreseeable future for the period of this plan.
Any other questions or thoughts?
No, I appreciate the discussion.
All right, perfect. So looking at those other 10, so we have the downtown university district. So the goal that's come out of all of this is to expand the city's core including the greater downtown and university districts, capitalizing on key areas that offer unique experiences and act as attraction destinations. And the objectives include cultivating a livable downtown and university area, support mixed-use infill and redevelopment, expand streetscape improvements, and strengthen multimodal connections. So that's that one. Looking at the third one then, strong neighborhoods and housing choices. The goal, preserve and develop neighborhoods that are active and walkable and offer a range of housing options. So 5 objectives that have been drafted to date. Encourage connected and walkable neighborhoods. Invest and maintain infrastructure. Making sure there's that mix of housing types. Preserving historic neighborhoods and strengthening the community through neighborhood-focused programs. Under a resilient and diverse economy, the goal, promote business growth for a diverse and stable economic base. We have a number of objectives: local and regional collaboration on economic development initiatives, improve broadband and infrastructure, grow, create, and retain local businesses and entrepreneurs, expand and sustain tourism, address child care shortages, assisting working families and single parents, address healthcare costs and access, explore emerging technologies that can have a positive impact on Grand Junction's economy. So obviously these aren't all things that city government addresses, but we're kind of the formulator of the vision for the community. And so working with all the various partners out there, hopefully all these things can come to pass. Under collective identity, the goal, promote a strong sense of pride and place in Grand Junction with an emphasis on community assets and livability. The objectives include the physical appearance of the city, streetscape improvements, supporting arts and culture, preserving Grand Junction historic assets, and establishing a community brand. Under efficient and connected transportation, goal, provide a safe and convenient multimodal transportation system. The objectives to reach that goal include safe and convenient, cohesive and connected transportation, filling in network gaps for pedestrians and bicyclists, expanding public transit, policies for new transportation technology, providing pedestrian and bicycle education opportunities, and implementing a wayfinding system. Under great places and recreational opportunities, the goal, expand the community's park system, recreation opportunities, and access to open spaces. The objectives to reach that goal, safe and accessible network of parks, open space, greenways, and trails. Continue to redevelop and revitalize the city's riverfront. Develop new park space and other community facilities. Preserve unique assets and maintain access to public lands. And develop a cohesive system. Under resource stewardship, goal, accommodate growth while reducing negative impacts to the natural systems on which Grand Junction relies. Objectives include promoting energy and water conservation, recycling, waste reduction and reuse, economic development opportunities with low environmental impacts, sustainable development practices, renewable energy, integrate land use and transportation planning, reduce the risk of fires and other natural hazards at the interface between urban and natural areas, and protecting our air quality.
Dave, on that last,
Yes.
Dave, on that last, so it says something about delivering drones. Can you talk about that a little bit?
You broke up a little bit. Delivering what?
Delivery drones.
Oh, yeah, it was, it's a new technology that I don't know a whole lot about, but I know they're starting to talk about it. And so to where I know that they've used drones to deliver, it happened in Baltimore, I think it was, and actually it was my wife's relative. He's a big name doctor in the DC Baltimore area, where they actually delivered a transplant organ by drone to a hospital, from hospital to hospital. And so, but there's also talk, about packages of all kinds of sorts that would be drone delivered. So when we think about it from a land use perspective, we need to be thinking about what that looks like and, and what that means in the sense of the space that would be required in order for that to occur, where it's not going to be entangled with other things going on around it, or whatever impact that might come out of or arise out of that kind of technology. And so as we look ahead for the next 20 years, who knows what the technology will look like in 10 or 20 years when it comes to those kinds of emerging technologies. So that was just an example we threw in there because it was something that came up in our public input, and we thought we need to at least recognize and address the fact that this is something we need to think about. Does that help?
Thank you.
All right. Great question. That's not something we think about every day for sure. Under effective and transparent government, the goal is to provide open community engagement in a collaborative and transparent manner, and includes all residents. And so some of the objectives include ensuring delivery of city services and infrastructure, aligning decision-making and budgeting with the implementation of the comprehensive plan. That's really important to the city. Providing broad and meaningful citizen engagement, collaborate with local, regional, and state partners, expand revenue opportunities and sources, providing professionalism, accessibility, and a high level of service to the community, fostering inclusivity that embraces and respects diversity, and diversify and expand public communication. So a big list of things that we need to be thinking about and doing. The last two, second to the last, we got education. Goals: support a high quality and accessible education system for the community. And objectives that we have listed are support the growth of institutions of higher learning, development of a skilled and adaptable workforce, and support School District 51's educational system. And then the last one, safe and healthy community. The goal is to promote public health and wellness, working with community healthcare organizations towards a safe, healthy, and inclusive community. And the objectives include community safety and emergency response, a safe and resilient community, provide high quality public safety and emergency response, health and wellness, and support neighborhood programs and associations. So those are the 11 kind of topic areas.
Hey, Dave, I have a question. Could you explain support neighborhood programs, associations to strengthen the community fabric?
Sure.
Can you give some examples?
I can jump in.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, we're gonna let Tamara jump in.
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Scott. So we've actually had a neighborhood program, and this is just one example here at the city for a number of years. It's kind of waned and waxed throughout the years, but we do support from a public perspective things like neighborhood block parties and other types of kind of micro grants, if you will, to neighborhoods to really help support their own gatherings or maybe some small improvement projects in their neighborhood. So that's just kind of an example of the types of things that may broadly get encompassed in a neighborhood program. But the idea is that the stronger our neighborhoods are, the stronger our community is. That's really an important piece of living here in Grand Junction.
Well, I think that's great, and I'd like just to make sure the community understands that, that knows that they know the resources from the planning development.
Great.
Any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, this is Ken. Just a couple of comments. Well, first of all, I think it's awesome, and I would support it as written to the letter. But a couple of things I saw that I thought maybe could be strengthened or highlighted a little more under resource stewardship. I like the objective, promote use of sustainable development practices. But I'm just wondering if that, might be strengthened a little bit instead of just promote use. Something like develop and implement a comprehensive sustainability plan. Because I know there is there's a, I can't remember what it's been called, a committee or task force or work group or something like that, that the city is forming with department leaders under Greg's leadership to look into that and, hopefully come up with some sort of a comprehensive plan on that would cover economic development or development practices as well as more broadly. So that's one thought. And then the other one under safety and health, which nobody could have anticipated at the time that most of this was coming out. But since the world has changed and one of the goals of recovering from COVID-19 is going to be do better planning next time. For the next time, maybe we could get something in that category about develop an effective epidemic preparedness plan or something to that nature.
Great comments.
I think the third bullet kind of, doesn't it?
So maybe just a couple of comments. Those are great thoughts there, Commissioner Scissors. Both of them, I would say, will likely fall under what we call convert implementation strategies. So very direct ways in which we further these goals and objectives. So good comments on that one. So we'll, when we get the full body of text, we'll make sure that those are generally reflected in there.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I wondered if maybe that was just kind of a next layer type of thing, but I just sort of wanted to get it in there so it's in your minds as you're taking that next step. Thank you.
Perfect.
Hey, Dave, can you go back to the transportation slide? So I don't want to bring up a difficult subject, but I will. I know that the Urban Trails Committee and Commission is working with the irrigation companies. Do we have specifically, try to improve that situation? Or do we just want to kind of stay out of that weeds?
At this higher level document, we're trying to stay out of the weeds, I think. But that could be an implementation thing down, that we could come out of.
Well, certainly long term, and I know that they're pretty resistant. So, but I think that's a long term. I think it's a huge key.
George, when I was
We're going to abandon the idea, that's for sure.
George, when I was on city council, we discussed that with the ditch people, trying to get them to open up their ditch trails for trails. And they said, hell no, absolutely not. We will never do that. So they're really hardcore no. But
Yeah.
The problem is our trails people keep including those in their trails, and all that does is aggravate the ditch people.
Got it.
Yeah, Sam did a nice job summarizing. If I can add just a little bit to that. So we've got two other kind of subsets of plans that currently support our comprehensive plan. One is the circulation plan. And most of you guys recall, although Sam, you weren't an active commissioner at that point, neither I don't think was Ken, but in the summer of 2018, we brought that update to Planning Commission City Council for adoption. And in doing that, the active transportation network on there really subtracted out all of the recreational components of our transportation system and really focused on what are the essential connections for active transportation, again, bipeds to provide kind of equity in the mobility system and transportation system here. So those remain on the plan, and we, as development occurs, we actually actively seek either easement or dedicated tracks along canals that would implement that adopted plan. So do know that's going on. I think secondly, and it's starting to ramp up right now, is that the city is doing open space and recreation master plan. As well. Originally, this was supposed to be almost on the coattails of the comp plan, but they're one starting while the other one's, in this case, the comp plan is ramping down. But I do think they'll be looking at connections throughout the community as part of that plan. And I think that I would suspect that the conversation and issue about canal trails comes up in that venue as well, in that planning process. So
That sounds good. I think that would be.
good questions there, George.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions about what you've seen so far?
Nope.
Looks like it's moving along very well.
Yeah, we're excited. We will let Dave jump in next steps here.
So the next steps, our hope would be to get the draft plan out for public review sometime in May, probably late May, since we're not going to get it till the 30th, and we need to get it to the CPAC first before we really watch it to everybody else. Then we want to hold a public open house with COVID-19. We're now exploring options for doing a virtual open house. So we're working on that right as we speak. Hopefully we can manage that in a way that will be useful and utilized by our public. And then really following all that, it would be coming to you all, the Planning Commission, for consideration and recommendation, and then on to City Council. So, we've got some months plugged in there. We think those are pretty close, if not on. And then Mesa County Planning Commission would be in there somewhere as well. I'm going to take them up on at least their current desire to stay with us and be part of the adoption process at least. So. Any questions on the next steps?
Good job, Dave.
Yeah, good job, Dave. Glad we're finally getting there.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Good. Well, if there are no other questions or comments at this point on comp plan, I am gonna ask the chairman, we had both neighborhood meetings and design standards up for discussion, and I'm wondering if it's okay if we switch those up and talk about the design standards for mini warehouses prior to neighborhood meetings.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Landon Haas here, who visited with you some time ago about mini storages, and I think some of our, staff's recognition that some of those facilities could be improved visually, and some techniques maybe for looking at how to help do that.
Landon, if I can say so, with those things hanging down over your shoulders, I feel like I'm back in New York looking at an Orthodox Jewish person.
Yeah, I'm not Jewish, but I'm flattered, so thank you.
If you had the hat, you'd be a dead ringer.
Well, I had the hat yesterday, actually. I was wearing a fedora yesterday at home, so. Okay, well, let's jump right into this. We'll go hopefully fairly quickly here. This is similar to the draft that you saw. I think it was December or January when we talked about this. Things that are being proposed for removal are stricken out, and things that are proposed to be added are underlined in color. So we'll just go through pretty quick, and I'll stop after every couple of sections just to see if you have any questions or concerns. Just with section 1 here, this is the purpose. And just to give you a little background, as Tamara and I have been looking at this, we've realized that this is actually a very poorly written section of code. So what we're looking at today mainly deals with landscaping, architectural, and site design standards. But the final draft that you will see at Planning Commission, we will have completely rewritten this section. So, and we're also happy to come back a third time if you feel it's needed.
So,
if you want to see.
If I may add a little bit on the kind of complete rewrite, that most of the other components of this section, it's kind of organization and structure, so we don't really see substantive changes to it, but do think there's some benefit in kind of rewording a couple sections and organizing it differently to make sure that it's fully understood what the intent is. And you guys want to take a look at it, you'll, I think, understand pretty quickly what we mean on kind of the issues relating to how it's currently authored.
Thanks, Tamara. Yeah, with that, we'll jump right into it. Number one, purpose. The original text talks about maintenance of storage unit facilities. There's no real maintenance section involved. So we're deleting those, or proposing to delete those words. And then just thinking ahead a little bit, we don't currently have any proposals for climate controlled indoor storage. And that may not come for 10 or 15 more years, depending on what happens. But we are proposing to add that these standards apply to both outdoor storage unit facilities and climate controlled indoor facilities. Just so to make it explicit that you know, when we do get developments like this, then we will be prepared for that. Any questions about section 1? Okay. Section 2, fencing and screening, no substantive changes proposed. Section 3, landscaping. We are proposing a couple of new sections based on, or I should say subsections based on what the Planning Commission recommended last time. We are proposing, similar to other screening standards that we have for other developments, we're asking or proposing for a 30-inch high turf berm with or without trees required along the width of the building abutting the public right-of-way, and that's required to be at least 10 feet in depth as well. So that's subsection 2, and then subsection 3, again based on some feedback from the Planning Commission last time, is that landscaping islands should be provided at the end of each row of storage units, and these, similar to our parking lot islands, would be at least 140 square feet and required to be planted with water-wise shrubs that require less water than other flora. And because part of the rationale for this would be screening, then we require that those shrubs reach at least 5 feet in height at maturity. And Tamara and I were discussing trees a little bit. Could they put in trees? Potentially there could be some issues with that as far as branches or root systems interfering with the storage units themselves. So I was thinking that shrubs were a nice compromise for that. Any questions about the proposed landscaping or any suggestions?
Hey, Landon, I have a question real fast. This is all for future. Is there anything retroactively?
No.
I'm sorry. What happens if, say, you have an older storage area, outside storage area, and they expand, and these are newer?
Yeah, excuse me. I'll let Tamara jump in on this one, but I believe up to a certain amount of addition, then we don't require them to.
It's a percentage of that.
Yeah. So it would be percentage upgrades. So, you know, if they're expanding by 10%, then, you know, 10% of the development would need to meet these requirements, but not the entire development. So, so this shouldn't be a regulatory burden on existing developments. Additionally, we can certainly, in fact, Currently, this provision didn't make it into this draft, but one other thing that we're proposing is that developments in the I1 and I2 zones, storage unit developments would not be required to do this. This would just be in the commercial and residential zones that that we discussed last time. You know, in areas where we may not care as much, the industrial zones, then this would not be required.
Okay,
Landon, this is Bill Wade. Just a quick question. Normally you do extensive, and I've always appreciated the fact that you guys do extensive background with other people's codes when you look at making adjustments in ours. Are landscaping things like this typically in code for these kinds of units?
We can definitely look into that. At the previous city that I worked for in Lehi, Utah, then this was not something that we required. This would be something a little bit different from what Lehi requires as far as landscaping goes. But we can definitely do some more research on that and see if other cities are doing similar things.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Other questions? Okay, section 4, architectural and site design standards. We have a few of these. Last time we talked about mini warehouse operations needing a primary entry structure at the main entrance of the development. We are working on creating a more firm definition of what a primary entry structure actually means. But we are proposing to include some photos. You may recognize these photos from the last presentation that we did back in December or January. The primary entry structure is designed to be kind of an office space or something like that, where there's engagement with the street, and it's also meant to serve as kind of a landmark. Storage unit facilities oftentimes are very, very low to the ground or flat, and it can be difficult to find them sometimes without GPS. So this is also kind of a wayfinding requirement as well. But we'll also work on creating the definition for primary entry structure. And then we have a few standards that we're proposing for these structures. Some of these you've seen before, some are new to this presentation. Number 1 is no parking between the building and the street. Number 2 is windows covering at least 30% of the street facing facade. Number 3 is use of high quality building materials such as brick, stone, wood, architectural grade metal, or similar exterior. And then we're also proposing that 2 of the following 4 design features need to be incorporated into the structure. Number 1, tower feature. Number 2, articulations in the street facing facade. Number 3, roofline articulations. And number 4, decorative lighting. So we were thinking of ways that we could help to dress up that primary entry structure without being too restrictive. Decorative lighting is something that we saw a lot in Lehi on industrial buildings, and it seems to, even that little touch did a lot to make it a little bit nicer and more inviting, instead of just sort of a forbidding industrial looking structure, which would, most developers I think would choose the decorative lighting as one because it would be relatively inexpensive, leaving one of the other 3 design features to be chosen. And then again, as with the landscaping, mini warehouses in the I1 and I2 zones, we would propose to exempt them from these architectural standards. Any questions about these architectural and site design standards? Okay. Well, we can certainly answer more of those later. Number 5, number 6, number 7, and number 8, we'll certainly be looking at these to clean up the language, remove any potential sections that are no longer necessary, but we're not proposing any changes in this draft. We are proposing to remove the building height requirement, the building height limit of 18 feet. Just again, to accommodate those interior climate controlled storage developments that may come in the future. And that's the last change. Any questions about what we've proposed in this draft?
No, I think it's good to be proactive and look at this area. I think it's going to grow more and more as the population grows, and it's just I think a comprehensive plan would be good.
Sure. Any other comments? Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Well, I would defer to the commission on this. Do you want to see a third draft with the entire section rewritten, or do you feel comfortable moving this to review at a planning commission hearing?
I'm comfortable letting you go ahead and finish it and then presenting it at the official meeting.
I am as well.
Yep, I am too.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I'm all right with it.
Very good. Well, it sounds like we have some direction on that. I will keep working on this, and I believe we've got it scheduled for, this is it, May 20th is the second meeting in May?
May 26th.
26th, okay. I'm thinking of city council. So we've got this plan for a May 26th planning commission hearing. So expect to see it then, and we really appreciate your feedback on this.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, commissioners. I think the last item for discussion was an item actually Commissioner Scissors brought to my attention about neighborhood meetings. And again, I'd given a preview at our last workshop. But as many of you know and are aware, the City Council, as part of their early March emergency ordinance, temporarily suspended the requirement for neighborhood meetings on projects. And that was extended until May 6th. I think the concern that was expressed was, is there another way for applicants to still conduct those neighborhood meetings so that they're essentially being screened and reviewed prior to actually getting to hearing at Planning Commission. And so maybe I'll turn Commissioner Scissors to see if you had any other background you wanted to add, and then we can talk through some alternatives that we may want to consider.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I don't know all the details of how this came to be, or even what the plan is to go back to some semblance of normal. So if there is a plan to reinstitute meetings, maybe with some modifications for appropriate contact precautions, then this could be a moot discussion. But,
yeah, that's a good question. I think that situation continues to evolve. I think at this point in time, Governor Polis has continued to support or prohibit any meetings or congregations of more than 10 people. And as we have experienced, certainly from staff, is that many neighborhood meetings certainly draw a larger audience than that. That said, it's always challenging to predict which ones get more or less attendance. There's some obvious ones in there, but some of the other ones we don't always know. I think that at least from where I'm seated, I don't think permanent suspension is in the works, or certainly even desirable by council. But certainly I think they would be open to seeing a revision to that, whereby an applicant, at least while we have these prohibitions on 10 or more people, that those are conducted virtually or by some other means that doesn't require physical presence.
Right, that is kind of where I'm coming from as well. I just think if we ended up getting a contentious proposal in front of us and there had not been a neighborhood meeting of any kind, and the neighbors were presenting in our Zoom setting for the very first time, that could be somewhat of a chaotic situation, which we would probably would end up not being in the benefit of the developer, and they would then have to go back and figure something out. So I think it's in everybody's best interest to have some type of a meeting, just understanding there'd have to be modifications in the rules of how that's conducted, just like there is for every other meeting that's being held everywhere on the planet right now. And I think there's enough experience in how to modify meetings to keep them safe that something could be put in place that was a reasonable compromise, to avoid a kind of a backlash situation from aggrieved neighbors that didn't feel like they got heard properly.
I think that's a good to bring this up. I think it actually to have a public meeting or with the important stakeholders. I think that actually gives us a better development. I think it gives us better projects. And I think it also probably helps the developer. Maybe I'm being utopian idealistic, but I think not only from a liability standpoint, but I think from a planning standpoint, I think having neighborhood meetings earlier in the development process probably helps develop a better product. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have had them. I don't know. Maybe, Tamara, you can tell me if I'm wrong or right. I don't know.
I think the intent certainly is what you just stated, George, is that the hope is that the developer or the proposer of an application is able to collect some information early on in the process and incorporate those suggestions or recommendations into the project, whether they be mitigation efforts or something of that nature. I think we all benefit certainly from having those neighborhood meetings. I think if nothing else, it's a dialogue, and those neighbors generally become much better informed about the scope of the project right from the beginning. So continue to support those. Our current developers that are kind of in limbo right now, we've certainly continued to encourage they connect or they conduct some kind of neighborhood meeting in a virtual space. I don't think we've had any to date, but they are certainly aware of that recommendation. Perhaps my suggestion at this point is that, should the city council extend the emergency ordinance, they will be taking it up on the 6th of May on that part of the agenda. Then the suggestion or recommendation maybe from Planning Commission is that they don't suspend, but otherwise require them to continue to be held, but can allow for a virtual setting for conducting those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. I appreciate that a lot. And, maybe between now and then, give a little thought to some systems or formats that might work. For example, they could have an in-person meeting if it was 10 or less people in a venue that allows social distancing, and require appropriate practices. And, maybe the neighbors could select representatives for them, or maybe the couple doesn't have to go, just one of the two. And maybe if it's a really huge one, maybe they just hold it at 2 separate times. You know, I think there's a lot of strategies. I'm just rattling a few off.
Yeah, no, all great comments, I think. I think this applies also to kind of the quasi judicial hearing. You know, at this point in time, that 10 persons or more meetings doesn't seem like it's going to be lifted anytime soon. And so we are already strategizing here internally with our clerk, city manager, attorney's office about how we might conduct quasi judicial hearings that do have a level of controversy behind them. At this, the city council has said they will conduct quasi judicial meetings, but they are for non-controversial items. So we've been moving those through the system, but there are certainly a couple others that continue to be on pause or on hold until we're a little further down the road. So we're certainly looking at strategies on how to try to maintain some business but still be respectful and follow that 10 or fewer persons or.
Great. That sounds great. Thanks for looking into this. I appreciate that.
I'm seeing at least all the faces that I can see up here nod heads on making sure we continue to have neighborhood meetings, but making some allowances for neighborhood meetings to be conducted virtually. Is that 100% head nod on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that sounds good. I will make sure to pass that along. And I think all of the business that was on the agenda, Commissioner, I do have a quick preview for next week's Planning Commission hearing, if you'd like to go through those items really briefly. I don't
Sure.
have the typical slide prepared for you or the slide deck, but just as a heads up, hopefully you guys have all seen the link to both GJ Speaks and to our typical posting location, but we have the first item is a request to vacate publicly dedicated easements for a drainage easement in Repair Park North subdivision. So fairly straightforward request. The second one is to request vacate a portion of seven different sections of road right-of-way and public sewer easements in the riverfront at Dos Rios project. This is anticipation of creating a plat for the lots in that riverfront at Dos Rios development. And the last one is, I know our chairperson's favorite item, which is a revision to the Keeping the Rooster section of our municipal code.
I did watch the video very closely on that item.
We didn't get the puppets out for it.
No, you should. I could film my chickens and you could incorporate them into the staff presentation.
So any questions there? That really wraps up what I think we had for you today.
Good
Now, will
work.
you be sending out, I assume you'll send out a Zoom link for Tuesday night.
Good workshop, staff. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us all today, and we will see you in this same format on Tuesday.
All right, all right.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jamie.
Who would have ever thought?
We did actually grab a couple sandwiches, so we're hungry. Feel free to snag one there.